It was a cold night, the kind that makes you shrug your shoulders and hasten your step. Eduardo, a billionaire used to the comfort of his luxury cars, was walking alone down a dark street. He had no idea that, in a matter of seconds, his life would be turned upside down. All because of a man, a beggar, whom he had never noticed before. But that night, Lucas, the beggar, would do something that would change everything. Two assailants came out of nowhere, knives glinting, voices thick. Eduardo was unprotected, paralyzed with fear. Then, out of the darkness, Lucas appeared. A man who lived on the streets with nothing to lose, risked his life to save a complete stranger. He was stabbed in the arm, but managed to ward off the criminals. Eduardo, in shock, looked at that wounded man and felt a wave of gratitude. Why would he do that for me? He thought. At that moment, he decided that he would do something for Lucas, something he couldn't even imagine. The next day, Eduardo took Lucas to a hospital, paid for his care, and offered him a job at his company. While they were talking, something caught Eduardo's eye, an old, worn bracelet that Lucas was wearing on his wrist. The bracelet was identical to the one he had given his son more than 20 years ago, before the boy disappeared forever. Eduardo felt a chill run down his spine. Could it be possible? Could Lucas, the beggar who saved his life, be the son he had been looking for? He didn't want to believe it, but his heart was beating faster. While Lucas slept in hospital, Eduardo picked up a strand of his hair. A DNA test could answer the question that now consumed his mind. And so the story began to unfold. A billionaire and a beggar, united by a fate that not even the most dramatic of scripts could have predicted. Secrets were about to come to light, and nothing would ever be the same. Lucas woke up in hospital, confused and disoriented. The white light in the room blinded him, and the pain in his arm was constant. He looked around and saw Eduardo sitting in a chair, watching him with a look that mixed concern and something else, something Lucas couldn't decipher. "You saved my life," said Eduardo, his voice soft but full of emotion. "And I want to help you. You don't have to live on the streets anymore." Lucas hesitated. Life on the streets was all he knew. Mistrust was natural, but something about the man seemed sincere. He accepted the job offer, still not fully understanding what was going on. Meanwhile, Eduardo couldn't take his eyes off that bracelet. It was identical to the one he had given his son, Gabriel. Before the boy disappeared, the bracelet had a small inscription, "Forever my son." Eduardo felt a lump in his throat. Could Lucas be Gabriel? He decided to investigate. While Lucas recovered, Eduardo hired a private detective to find out more about the beggar's past. The first clues were emerging. Lucas had been found as a child, wandering alone in a distant town. No one knew where he came from, and he himself didn't remember anything before the age of 6. Eduardo began to get closer to Lucas, trying to win his trust. They talked about everything, from Eduardo's business to Lucas' stories about life on the streets. Little by little, a strange connection began to form between the two, but not everything was smooth sailing. As Eduardo approached Lucas, someone was watching, someone who didn't want the past to come to light. One day, Lucas received an anonymous message, "Be careful who you trust. The past can be dangerous." Lucas showed the message to Eduardo, who became even more determined to find out the truth. He knew he was close to something big, something that could change their lives forever. And so, the mystery began to deepen. The past that haunted Eduardo and Lucas was about to be revealed, and with it, secrets that could destroy everything they knew. Translated with dpel.com, free version. The next few days were a roller coaster of emotions for Eduardo and Lucas. The DNA test Eduardo had ordered was ready, and he could hardly breathe as he held the envelope in his hands. Every second seemed like an eternity as he opened the document and read the results. Genetic compatibility confirmed. 99.9% probability of paternity. Eduardo felt his legs go weak. Lucas really was his son, Gabriel, whom he had lost more than 20 years ago. The memories of the kidnapping came back like a hurricane. That terrible day, the endless search, the pain of never knowing what had happened to his boy. And now he was there, in front of him, alive. But how to tell Lucas? How to explain that beggar, who grew up without a family, without love, was actually the son of a billionaire? Eduardo knew that the truth could destroy Lucas, but he also knew that he couldn't hide it. Meanwhile, Lucas was beginning to realize that something was happening. Eduardo looked at him in a different way, as if he was seeing something other than what was there. The conversations between the two became deeper and deeper, and Lucas felt a strange connection with the man. "Eduardo, is there something you're not telling me?" asked Lucas in a moment of courage. Eduardo took a deep breath. It was now or never. "Lucas, I need to tell you something. Something that will change everything." He began to speak, slowly, choosing each word carefully. He told us about the kidnapping, about the tireless search, about the bracelet that was the only reminder he had of his son. And then, finally, he handed over the results of the DNA test. Lucas stared at the paper in disbelief. The words seemed to dance before his eyes. He was Eduardo's son. His whole life, all the pain, all the loneliness, it all made sense now, but it was also too much to process. I don't know what to say," Lucas mumbled, feeling the tears run down his face. Eduardo approached, putting a hand on his son's shoulder. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that I never stopped looking for you. And now that I've found you, I'm going to do everything I can to protect you." But while the two of them were trying to process their discovery, someone else was watching them. Someone who didn't want the truth to be revealed. In the dark, a figure watched, planning their next move. The story was far from over, and the dangers were only beginning. The revelation about Lucas' true identity echoed like thunder in Eduardo's life. But as he tried to get closer to his lost son, other secrets began to emerge, like cracks in a wall that seemed solid. Mariana, Eduardo's wife, seemed distant ever since Lucas came into their lives. She avoided looking into her husband's eyes, and when she did, there was something in her gaze that he couldn't decipher. One night, after Lucas had gone to bed, Eduardo decided to confront her. "Mariana, what's going on? Why are you acting like this?" he asked with a mixture of concern and irritation. She hesitated, looking down at her hands, as if she was struggling with herself. Finally, she spoke in an almost inaudible voice. "Eduardo, there's something I've never told you. Something about Gabriel's kidnapping." Eduardo felt his heart stop. "What do you mean?" Mariana took a deep breath, as if she was preparing to let go of a weight she had been carrying for years. "At that time, I received a threat. Someone told me that if I told the truth, something terrible would happen to you. I was afraid, Eduardo, afraid of losing you." Eduardo was paralyzed. "What truth, Mariana? What are you hiding?" She began to cry, the words coming out between sobs. "I knew Gabriel was alive. I received a message days after the kidnapping saying that he was fine, but that we would never see him again if I told anyone. I didn't know what to do, so I kept it to myself." Eduardo felt a surge of anger and pain. "You knew our son was alive, and you didn't tell me? For all these years, You let me believe he was dead." Mariana tried to explain, but words seemed useless. Eduardo was devastated. He didn't know how to process this revelation. Meanwhile, Lucas, who had overheard part of the conversation, stood in the corridor, feeling the ground disappear beneath his feet. He wasn't just Eduardo's lost son. He was the son someone had tried to hide. And now, with the truth coming out, he wondered, who else was involved in this? Who had threatened Mariana? And why? As the family tried to deal with the secrets that were emerging, a shadowy figure watched from afar with a cold smile. The game was just beginning, and the pieces were moving. The tension in Eduardo's house was palpable. Lucas, now aware of his true identity, was trying to process everything he had discovered. He wasn't just a beggar who had saved the life of a billionaire. He was Gabriel, the lost son, and someone had tried to erase his existence. Meanwhile, Eduardo and Mariana were estranged, each carrying the weight of the secrets that had been revealed. Eduardo couldn't forgive Mariana for hiding the truth, and she, in turn, felt guilty and scared. Something in the air told them that danger was closer than they had imagined. One evening, as Lucas walked through the mansion's garden, he felt that he was being watched. He looked around but saw no one. Even so, the feeling persisted. The next day, he found an anonymous letter in his room. The message was clear and threatening. "You don't belong here. Get out before it's too late." Lucas showed the letter to Eduardo, who was alarmed. "This can't go on," he said with determination. "We need to find out who's behind this." Eduardo decided to hire a private security guard to protect Lucas, but he knew that wouldn't be enough. He needed to find out who was trying to keep his son away and why. Meanwhile, Mariana started acting strangely. She was receiving mysterious phone calls and leaving the house unannounced. Eduardo, suspicious, decided to follow her. He saw her meeting a man in a distant cafe. The man was Victor, a former business partner of Eduardo's, with whom he had broken off relations years ago. Eduardo was shocked. What was Mariana doing with Victor? He decided to confront her as soon as she got home. "Mariana, what are you hiding now? Why were you with Victor?" he asked, his voice full of anger and suspicion. Mariana looked scared, but also determined. "Eduardo, I have no choice. Victor knows things that could destroy us. He's threatened me, and I don't know what to do." Eduardo felt a wave of frustration. He knew that Victor was dangerous, but he hadn't imagined that he was involved in this. Now, he needed to act quickly to protect his family. Meanwhile, Lucas began to investigate on his own. He discovered that Victor had links to the kidnapping that took him away from his family. Little by little, he was piecing together the puzzle, but each piece revealed brought more danger. And so the family found themselves entangled in a web of secrets and threats. The past was coming back to haunt them, and the future seemed uncertain. The discovery that Victor was involved in Lucas' kidnapping was a huge blow to Eduardo. He couldn't believe that someone he had considered a friend could be capable of something so cruel. But now, with the pieces of the puzzle falling into place, he knew he had to face up to the past in order to protect the future. Eduardo decided to confront Victor directly. He arranged to meet in a public place, knowing that Victor wouldn't dare do anything drastic with witnesses nearby. When the two met, the tension in the air was palpable. "Victor, I know what you've done," Eduardo said, his voice firm and full of anger. "You kidnapped my son. Why? What did you get out of it? What did you get out of it?" Victor smiled a cold, calculating smile. "Eduardo, you've always been naive. Did you think you could dismiss me as a partner and get away with it? I wanted you to suffer, as I did. And I did. For more than 20 years, you've lived with the pain of losing your son. Eduardo felt a surge of hatred, but remained calm. And now? What do you want now? Victor looked at him with a glint in his eyes. Now, I want you to suffer again. Lucas doesn't belong to you. He never did. And I'm going to make sure he disappears again. Eduardo knew he couldn't let that happen. He had to protect Lucas at all costs. Meanwhile, Lucas, who had overheard the conversation, felt a mixture of anger and fear. He knew Victor was dangerous, but he also knew he couldn't run away forever. Lucas decided to act. He began to investigate Victor further, discovering that he had connections with powerful and dangerous people. He also discovered that Victor was planning something big, something that could destroy Eduardo's family once and for all. Meanwhile, Mariana, remorseful and frightened, decided to help. She told Eduardo and Lucas everything she knew about Victor, including the threats he had made over the years. Together, they began to put together a plan to confront Victor and expose his crimes. But Victor was not an easy enemy to defeat. He had resources and allies and was always one step ahead. The family knew they had to act fast before it was too late. With the truth about Victor exposed, Eduardo and Lucas knew they had to act fast. Victor wasn't just a dangerous enemy. He was someone who wouldn't hesitate to destroy everything they loved. But before facing him, there was a more pressing issue: rebuilding the trust between them. Lucas was still processing everything, discovering that he was the son of a billionaire, that he had been kidnapped, and that his whole life had been a lie. It was too much for anyone. He felt torn between anger, gratitude, and confusion. Eduardo, for his part, was determined to win back the son he had lost. "Lucas, I know I can't change the past," said Eduardo one quiet evening in the garden of the mansion, "but I can guarantee that the future will be different. You are no longer alone." Lucas looked at him, his eyes full of emotion. "Eduardo, I don't know if I can trust you. All I've ever known is pain and loneliness. How can I just forget that?" Eduardo felt his heart squeeze. He knew that words weren't enough. He needed to show Lucas that he was willing to do anything for him. Meanwhile, Mariana was trying to make amends. She knew she had been wrong to hide the truth, but she was determined to help her family rebuild. She began investigating Victor on her own, discovering that he was planning a major scam to destroy Eduardo financially. "Eduardo, we have to act fast," said Mariana, showing him the evidence she had found. "Victor is planning something big, and if we don't do something, he's going to destroy us." Eduardo agreed. He knew he needed to confront Victor once and for all. But before that, he needed to make sure Lucas was safe. He hired security guards to protect the mansion and began to put together a plan to expose Victor publicly. Lucas, however, didn't want to be left out. He felt that he needed to be part of it, that he needed to face Victor in order to overcome the past. "I'm not going to run away," Lucas said with determination. "Victor took everything from me. I'm not going to let him take anything else." Eduardo hesitated, but saw the determination in his son's eyes. He knew he couldn't protect him forever. Together, they began to put together a plan to confront Victor. But Victor was not an easy enemy to defeat. He was always one step ahead, and his threats were becoming more and more real. The family knew they had to act fast before it was too late, and so the game of cat and mouse continued, with each side trying to outwit the other. The truth about the kidnapping was finally coming out, but the danger was far from over. The plan to confront Victor was underway. Eduardo, Lucas, and Mariana worked together, each contributing what they knew to bring down the enemy that threatened to destroy their lives. Victor, however, was no ordinary adversary. He had resources, allies, and a calculating mind that always kept him one step ahead. Eduardo decided to use his influence to expose Victor publicly. He organized a major press conference where he planned to reveal all the evidence they had against him. Documents, recordings, and witnesses proving Victor's involvement in Lucas' kidnapping and other crimes. Meanwhile, Lucas and Mariana were working behind the scenes. Lucas used his street skills to uncover information about Victor's allies, while Mariana used her contacts to ensure that the evidence was incontrovertible. On the day of the conference, the tension was palpable. Eduardo was on stage, in front of a crowd of journalists and cameras, ready to reveal the truth. But at the last moment, Victor appeared with a cold smile on his lips. "Eduardo, do you really think you can beat me?" said Victor, his voice full of disdain. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." Eduardo remained calm, knowing he couldn't let himself be intimidated. "Victor, your actions speak for themselves. Today, the world will know the truth about you." Victor laughed, but there was something in his eyes that suggested concern. He knew Eduardo had proof, but he also knew he couldn't let that happen. It was then that Lucas appeared, holding a USB stick with crucial information. "Victor, this is enough to put you behind bars for a long time," he said, his voice firm and determined. Victor looked at Lucas, and for the first time, he seemed uncertain. "Do you really think you can beat me, kid? You don't know who you're messing with." Lucas didn't flinch. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with, and I'm not afraid of you." The crowd remained silent, watching the confrontation. Eduardo seized the moment to present the evidence, showing the world the truth about Victor. The cameras captured every moment, and the headlines were already starting to circulate. Victor, realizing he was cornered, tried to flee, but was intercepted by the police, who had been alerted by Mariana. He was taken into custody while the crowd cheered. Eduardo, Lucas, and Mariana hugged each other, relieved to have faced the enemy and won. But even with Victor in custody, they knew that the past would still haunt them. And so the story reached a crucial point, with the family finally united and ready to face the future. But what did the future hold for them?